this is Frode and welcome back to Actualize Notes TV. Today we have another great book, the Enchiridion by Epictetus. Enchiridion. This is a really small book and it directly translates into handbook or manual. I like the more practical translation, ready at hand, as in a sword that you use to slash through life's challenges. And it's a distillation of Epictetus' lectures, which are more abbreviated on in the book Discourses. And one of his students, called Arian, frantically noted down what Epictetus said, word for word, in that time, when they didn't have computers. So, thank you, Arian. And Epictetus was a slave, grew up as a slave boy, and eventually he was freed. He became a philosopher, and then he was expelled from Rome and spent the rest of his life teaching Stoicism, Stoic philosophy in Nicopolis. And what I find most inspiring is that Epictetus, who was a slave as a child, became one of the most influential people on Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful person in his time. He was the Roman emperor. And Aurelius has a lot of quotes from Epictetus in his book Meditations. So, in short, Enchiridion is a handbook, ready at hand, for creating a life of happiness, calmness, tranquility, and all that goodness. It's a long quote of goodness, so it was really hard to pick the good ideas. Kind of reminds me of Confucius' Analects and Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. But I think no matter who you are, how old you are, if you're a man or a woman, boy or girl, old man or old woman, you'll find it really useful for living an awesome life. So let's have a look at our 5 big ideas. First one is power. This is the #1 rule of Stoicism, and in his book Discourses, Epictetus says that this is really the only thing you have to remember to have a good life after Stoic rules. And that is that of things, some are in our power and others are not. In other words, there are some things we can control. What's that? That's ourselves. That's our opinions, our actions, what we move away from, what we move towards, the goals we choose for ourselves, our opinions, as I said, and all the things we don't control, well, that's basically everything else. What other people do, their opinions, what they say, what happens in the world, the weather, the sun, anything. And one way to achieve happiness is to look at all these things and distinguish between the things we can control and not, and don't try to change the things that we can't control. Stephen Covey talks about this idea in his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he calls it the circle of influence. We all basically have this circle of influence, and all the things that influence us, our lives. And within this circle of influence we have our circle of concern, and that's our own actions. Proactive people are those who spend more and more time on their circle of concern, what they can control, and less time on all the other things. Every breaking news story, everything that happens on social media, the weather, other people's opinions. So, check in on yourself. Are you trying to control things that you can't control? For example, other people. I know that I get that tendency a lot. So, think about that as we go on to our next big idea. Desire. Desire, in this sense, is not pleasure, as we'll talk about later. Desire is other words for inspiration or ambition. And Epictetus says that when we consider things like our career path or what we'll do with our lives, we need to consider what comes first and what follows. We need to consider how awesome it would be to be a gladiator in that time, and all of the tedious hours of hard training. We need to consider how cool it would be to be a tragedian actor, and all the hours we need to practice. We need to consider, for example, for real estate investing, how awesome it would be to be an investor, a real estate investor, and all of the uncomfortable hours of work and uncomfortable conversations we would have. And but the problem is when we become so inspired by other people, either someone famous, or by what they're doing, that we also want to do the same, and we start jumping from thing to thing to thing, but we never stick to anything. Seneca talks about this in On the Shortness of Life, and he says that most people have no fixed goal, but are torn about by this fickleness, which is ever-shifting and never satisfied with itself. And there's a term for this in Sanskrit. The word is arambashura, and it means hero in the beginning. You're a hero in the beginning. You're so passionate and ambitious with what you're starting on, and you're going to change the world, conquer the world with what you're doing. And then when it gets hard, well, you tiptoe out the back door, and then you go to a new pursuit. Do just the same, and when it gets hard, you tiptoe out the back door. But I have a strong tendency to do this, but with Actualize, this is something I'm sticking to. So think about it, your last 6 to 12 months or 5 years of life, if you have been jumping from thing to thing to thing, in your work life, in your relationships, in any area of your life, think about if you have this tendency, and whether or not you will resolve to stick to what you're doing. Don't look for the right work, but focus more on working right. As Calvin says in his book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. But that's desire. Cold desire, Epictetus calls it. Just jump from thing to thing to thing. Next big idea, virtue. Epictetus seems a bit annoyed, and he says that, why can't we look at the man in himself, his character, instead of looking at his clothes, his appearances, his ancestors, and his money? Because that's what we need to look at. We want to look at one person's virtue. We want to see who the person is, not whether they're hot, they're wealthy, or they have a lot of fame. Emerson also echoes this in his essays. He says, a hero is one who focuses more and more on being great than on seeming great. In short, be and not seem. Seneca also has a great quote in his book, Moral Letters to Lucilius. It's, a dwarf will still be short, though you place it on a mountain, and a statue will still be tall, though you place it in a well. So are you more caught up in how you seem to other people? If you're hot, if you're wealthy, if you're famous? Or do you focus more on being great, being a hero, doing what you need to do day in, day out, whether you feel like it or not, and whether or not other people will notice it immediately? Get clear on that. Go on to fourth big idea, act. Epictetus says that you shouldn't tell another person how he should eat, but eat as you ought to eat. It's really about act and don't tell everybody else what they're supposed to be doing with their lives. And he has a really graphic picture to describe this. It's just like the sheep, who doesn't vomit up everything he has eaten and shows it to the shepherd. But he should instead digest the food and create wool and milk for the shepherd. So we also need to digest what we're learning and taking in, apply it to our own lives, and then we can start preaching it to other people. But we don't want to vomit up things and show everything to everybody else, like the sheep. In short, in his book Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says, the master doesn't talk, he acts. How are you doing on this? Last big idea, pleasure. This is a good one. Epictetus gives us two alternatives. The first one is we can choose to either indulge in our pleasures, our addictions, like jumping onto social media when you should be working, eating a lot of unhealthy foods, or being distracted, and then feel despise of ourselves. Or we can choose to abstain from it and see how proud we will be when you do that. And the second alternative is to mindfully indulge in the pleasures, because we don't have to be ascetists, or we don't have to completely abstain from every single pleasure like there is. So never eat any good food, never go onto social media, never be distracted, but we need to do it mindfully. We don't want to be pulled by the horns to by our impulses to indulge in these pleasures. We want to do it mindfully, and we can have the pride of having gone victoriously through the indulgence, not having been pulled by the horns. So that's pleasure. Act. Don't vomit up everything you learn. Instead, apply it and show what you have learned. Virtue. Look at the man and his character, or the woman, instead of their clothes, their hotness, fame, and wealth. Desire. Don't jump from thing to thing to thing, but consider what comes first and what follows. The amazing things you can accomplish and all the hard work that's required. And finally, power. Some things are in our power and others are not. We have to distinguish between what's in our powers and do everything we can about that, and distinguish between the things which are not in our power. But what is always in our power is our ability to choose our response. That's a really quick look at Enchiridion by Epictetus. Highly enjoyed it. I hope you did. Now, what is the one idea that really jumped out at you, that resonated with you, and how can you apply it more consistently to your life starting today? Get on that. Thanks for watching. Look forward to sharing his discourses with you. Have another awesome day. See ya.